Thank you, friend. Shabbat shalom. Vayakhel, and he assembled. Money don't get everything, it's true. What it don't get, I can't use. Now give me money. That's what I want. Friends, this parsha has a continuation to it. It's a continuation of the construction of the tabernacle. And there's much repetition. It's about collecting contributions. Contributions for the work, contributions for the artists. It's about the Sabbath again. But I actually want to begin with something that occurred at the end of the last parsha, something that isn't talked about very often, but it leads into the beginning of this one. In Exodus 34:5 and 34:6, we're given the first hint of Maimonides' famous merciful God attributes. And it's introduced with the double name calling formula that we've seen before, the formula which defined the lives of those when it occurred. Abraham, Abraham, and the Akedah. Jacob, Jacob, with the ladder to heaven. Moses, Moses, with the burning bush. And each of those we were given information had to do with learning not to be afraid because God would be there. And now we're given another double name calling. Yahweh, Yahweh. And even the way it's set up. And Yahweh came down in a cloud and stood with him there. And he invoked the name Yahweh. And Yahweh passed in front of him and called Yahweh, Yahweh. Merciful and gracious God, slow to anger and abounding in kindness and faithfulness. Nothing to be afraid of. Friends, this is certainly the most quoted and often used formula of all in the Tanakh. And it is the closest we ever get to seeing the Torah describing the nature of God. From now on, I'll be busy. Ain't going nowhere fast. I'm just glad it's over. Seeing the real you at last. We're then given insight into how even in its infancy, the Torah was designed to be a dynamic, organic code of laws, and it still is, changing and adapting. Even after what was carved in stone gets destroyed and recarved. For God says, you shall not make molten gods for yourself. This was not part of the original Decalogue, friends, but after the golden calf incident, it was added as a prohibition. And then one of the most amazing things in the Torah takes place, and it's one that has been misinterpreted for centuries and has had amazing repercussions. In Exodus 34:29, Moses is coming back down the mountainside carrying the 2 tablets of testimony. And we are told that he hadn't realized that the skin of his face was transformed. Friends, Moses had just gone through a once in human history encounter with God. And because of the difficulty of the Hebrew language and the words that were used, it's understood that the meaning behind this phrase was Moses' face beams light or began to glow. And the verb used is karan, and this is its only use in the Torah. But a Latin translation of it used the word karen, and that word means horn. And that makes no sense because horns come from the head, not from the face. But it led to the belief that Moses had horns. And the most famous depiction of that being Michelangelo's Moses. And a stereotype lives on. We can certainly expect transformation to occur anytime we're in the presence of the Creator of everything. And that transformation is going to be to our very souls. All of the things that take place within us emanate from inside out. So it's natural that Moses' inner essence as well as his outer essence would have been transformed in that experience. And our sages believed that he was burned as a result of his encounter with God, and that's why he wore the veil. But it marked the establishment of something else. It marks the establishment of a series of layers in the channel to God. A series of tents within tents, and we've talked about them each as individual items. The paraket, the mishkan, the ohel, each of which is still part of our own approach to sacredness. We partition off the most sacred part, the most sacred space, and we envelop it in layers, and we continue to work to get away, to enter each of the sections part by part, purifying ourselves. But it remains accessible to all of us, and it's a reminder that God will always be accessible to all of us. And this creation of the sacred is what this whole first half of the parsha is about. It deals specifically with the sacredness of the Sabbath again. The tabernacle commands ended with the Sabbath, and now Moses' repetition of those commands begins with the Sabbath. And there is a connection between the tabernacle and the Sabbath. The creation story in Genesis also ended with the Sabbath as a sanctification of time. And now the nation begins the construction of the tabernacle, the most holy space on earth. And we have the inevitable connection of sacred time to sacred space. And we'll address these again and again as they continue to represent so much of the Tanakh. Sacred time, sacred space. And friends, we continue to create sacred space for ourselves in our lives. And we're reminded over and over that if we do nothing else, we are to keep sacred time as well. Moses repeats God's commands to the people about the Sabbath, but he makes a change. And he adds something himself. He says, "You shall not burn a fire in all of your homes on the Sabbath day." This, friends, is a game changer. Our sages have wondered, why was fire singled out from all forbidden things? And why did Moses add it? Because it was not part of the original instructions from God. This is the first time that fire was associated with the Sabbath. And fire had just played a prominent role in the entire golden calf incident. It was responsible for its creation. Aaron threw the gold into the fire and out came the calf. And it was paramount to its destruction. Moses destroyed it in fire. So perhaps the prohibition was a reminder of the golden calf rebellion. Perhaps it was also suspension of technology. The control and use of fire is unique to humanity. Our sages saw it as the basis for our advances in science and innovations in technology. Even now we focus on fuel sources for burning. Fire, my friends, is the metaphor for our power and control over nature. By giving it up at home, not everywhere, not the tabernacle, just at home, we are participating again in the sacredness of space and time. Friends, this is a parsha of repetition, and it's a parsha of construction instructions. It's designed for the detail-oriented who can follow the manufacture and formulae for creation, while those who get caught up in the stories and prefer the adventures nod off and skip so much of this. It doesn't matter to you whether there were 50 loops to hold or 49. Does it matter that 6 of the curtains were joined on one side, 5 on the other? What this does do is it points to the fact that some of us are left-brained, some of us are right-brained. Some are creative, some are logical. Emotion and intellect, the two balancing paths on the tree of life. Art and science. And this is a book to speak to all. And one of the most important things this parsha speaks to, aside from the sacredness of space and time, aside from the need to keep emotion and intellect in balance, aside from the need to remember, even though layers exist between God and us, He is accessible. As the two very unusual events took place. The men came together with the women. In a book that many find sexist, where the focus tends to be on men or the masculine plural, this passage stands out because of its repeated references to men and women equally. And the artisans telling Moses, the people are bringing more than enough. Friends, the level of generosity is huge in this parsha. The people bring far more than was ordered of them. They bring it with zeal, and accordingly, that has given rise to a new meaning for a word. The word for commandment is mitzvah. And because of this parsha, it has two meanings to this day. It is a law to be obeyed, but it is also understood to mean a good deed freely performed. And who hasn't said that's a mitzvah, meaning a good deed freely performed? A great scholar recently pointed out to me that many things are done by tradition. Some are great traditions, and some aren't so great. The generosity of the culture and the human spirit is a great tradition. And he suggested that it stems from this parsha, and it could be because of the guilt that the people felt because of the golden calf episode. And it shouldn't be changed. It's a tradition to keep. But other ones, even as simple as picking on the rookie or the new guy, are done simply because they were done before and become part of the game of life that is accepted. His advice was, change the game. Moses changed the game with the prohibition of fire. Friends, where do you need to change the game in your life? As Joni Mitchell sang, and the seasons they go round and round, and the painted ponies go up and down. We're captive on the carousel of time. We can't return, we can only look behind from where we came and go round and round and round in the circle game. Shabbat Shalom.